My name is Juniper Thorne, and at 34, my life was a carefully constructed edifice of stability. I was a marketing director at Aegis Marketing Solutions, a position earned through a decade of relentless competence. My apartment in the city was a sanctuary of minimalist order, every object curated, every surface clean, a stark contrast to the sprawling, emotionally cluttered Tudor home, Viridian Gables, where I grew up. I was the reliable one, the strong one, the ever-present daughter who could be counted on to translate my parents' anxieties into actionable solutions and mediate my younger brother's perpetual states of crisis. I didn't see this role as a burden. I saw it as my function, the central pillar of the Thorne-Finch family architecture. I had believed in that architecture. I believed it was built on a foundation of love. Then, 2023 descended like a fog, thick and disorienting. In April, a sudden cardiac event took my father. My mother, a woman who seemed to draw her life force directly from his, withered before my eyes. She followed him in September, succumbing to what the doctors called complications from pneumonia, but which I knew to be a broken heart. The grief was a physical weight, a crushing pressure in my chest. I managed the funerals, the estate affairs, the endless calls of condolence, all while propping up my brother Caleb, who seemed to have dissolved into a puddle of incomprehensible sorrow. The final act of my parents' lives was to be read a month later in the mahogany-paneled office of their lawyer, Mr. Abernathy, a man whose jowls seemed to sag with the weight of other people's final wishes. The air in the room was thick with the scent of old paper and furniture polish. Caleb sat beside me, fidgeting, his leg bouncing with a nervous energy that scraped against my own raw grief. He was 30, but in that moment, he looked like a lost teenager. Mr. Abernathy cleared his throat, the sound unnaturally loud in the solemn quiet. He began to read from the document titled The Thorne-Finch Last Will and Testament. The legalese was dense, a river of jargon, but the current was clear. The stocks, the bonds, the investment portfolios, the savings accounts, all of it flowed in one direction, to my beloved son, Caleb Finch. I felt a prickle of confusion, but I remained silent, assuming my share would be addressed separately. Then came the matter of the house. Viridian Gables, with its 4 bedrooms, its meticulously tended rose gardens, its library filled with first editions, its very history interwoven with my own, was also bequeathed solely and entirely to Caleb. My heart began a slow, heavy drumbeat against my ribs. Caleb shot me a glance, his expression a mixture of confusion and something that looked unnervingly like triumph. Mr. Abernathy paused, peering at me over his spectacles. "And for you, Juniper," he said, his tone softening with a practiced pity, "your parents have left a personal letter." He slid a crisp, cream-colored envelope across the polished expanse of the desk. My name was written on the front in my mother's elegant, looping script. It felt cold to the touch. Inside was a single sheet of matching stationery, titled The Thorne Disinheritance Letter. The words that followed were not an attack. They were far more insidious. They were a eulogy for the daughter they had used up. "My dearest Juniper," it began, "we leave this world with nothing but love for both of our children. As we considered our final legacy, we were faced with a simple truth. You have always been the strong one. Your accomplishments, your independence, your incredible self-sufficiency are a source of immense pride for us. You built a life for yourself, a testament to the resilience we always knew you possessed. Caleb, as you know, is different. He has a beautiful, artistic soul, but he navigates the world with a more delicate heart. He needs support. He needs a foundation upon which to build his life, a comfort we can no longer provide in person. Viridian Gables is that foundation. The resources we have left him are the tools." The words blurred. The carefully constructed sentences were a masterpiece of psychological warfare, each compliment a poisoned dart. They weren't disinheriting me as a punishment, they were disinheriting me as a compliment. Because you are so capable, it continued, we know you do not need these things from us. To give you what you do not need would be a disservice to your brother, who needs it all. We have given you the gift of a good upbringing and a strong character. The rest you have capably secured for yourself. We trust that you will continue to be the wonderful, supportive sister you have always been, and help Caleb be a worthy steward of our legacy. He will need your guidance. I folded the letter, my fingers unnaturally steady. A lifetime of quiet sacrifice, of paying his rent when his artistic soul couldn't, of co-signing loans for cars he promptly crashed, of talking him down from ledges of his own making, was not just unacknowledged, it was enshrined as my perpetual duty. My strength was not my asset, it was my liability, the justification for my erasure. Responsibility punished, irresponsibility rewarded. The betrayal was so profound, so absolute, it felt like a physical blow. It was a posthumous confirmation of a dynamic I had only ever felt subconsciously. They hadn't just left Caleb the house and the money, they had left him me. I was the unpaid, unmentioned, but essential manager of the entire inheritance. I looked across the desk at Mr. Abernathy, my expression a blank mask. I looked at Caleb, who was now staring at me, a dawning, greedy understanding in his eyes. He wasn't just my brother anymore. He was my burden, by design. And the life I thought I had built, the one of purpose and stability, was revealed to be nothing more than a training ground for the real job my parents had left me, the eternal maintenance of Caleb Finch. The weeks that followed the reading of the will were lived in a state of suspended animation. On the surface, nothing changed. I went to work at Aegis, my performance as crisp and efficient as ever. I maintained the immaculate order of my apartment. I answered calls from concerned relatives with a calm, reassuring tone that belied the maelstrom within me. But beneath this placid surface, I was a house being dismantled from the inside out. My memories, once sources of comfort, had become a gallery of evidence, each one tainted by the new, horrifying truth. I'd remember my college graduation. My parents had beamed with pride as I crossed the stage, my father boasting to everyone about my full scholarship and the job offer I'd already secured. Later that evening, at a celebratory dinner, he'd slipped a check across the table to Caleb, who had recently dropped out of his third liberal arts program. "For your photography," my father had murmured, as if sharing a secret, "to get the right equipment." I had felt a brief, selfish sting of jealousy, which I immediately buried under a thick layer of guilt. I was the self-sufficient one. Of course Caleb needed the help. Now, I saw the scene for what it was. Not a gesture of support for a struggling artist, but another carefully laid brick in the wall of his dependence and another reinforcing bar in the cage of my competence. The anger was a living thing inside me. It was a cold, clean fury, unlike any emotion I had ever allowed myself to feel. It burned away the fog of grief and filial duty, leaving behind a stark, clear landscape. I saw my parents not as the loving, if flawed, people I had mourned, but as architects of a grand, manipulative design. And I saw Caleb not as their willing accomplice, a co-conspirator in my lifelong emotional conscription. I was waiting for his call. I knew it was coming as surely as I knew the sun would rise. The only question was when. It came on a Tuesday night in early 2024. A storm was raging outside, rain lashing against the floor-to-ceiling windows of my apartment on the 17th floor. I was nursing a glass of wine, watching the city lights blur and bleed in the deluge below. My phone buzzed on the granite countertop, the screen illuminating with his name. I let it buzz a second time, then a third, a small act of defiance. Finally, I answered, putting the call on speaker. "Junes, hey," he began, his voice attempting a breezy, man-of-the-house tone that sounded utterly absurd. "Just calling to check in. How are things?" "I'm fine, Caleb." "Oh, good, good. Listen, the reason I'm calling, some mail came, for the house. Looks important." He paused, waiting for me to take the bait, to ask the questions, to step into my role. I remained silent, the only sound the drumming of the rain and the faint hum of my dishwasher. His forced nonchalance began to fray. It's the mortgage documents, Junes, and a bill for the property taxes. It's a lot. I thought maybe you could come over this weekend and we could, go through it all, figure out a plan for how we're going to handle it. There it was. We, the casual, all-encompassing pronoun that had defined my existence. It was the we that meant I would do the work while he reaped the benefits. A switch flipped inside me. The cold fury solidified into something hard and sharp as diamond. There is no we, Caleb, I said, the words clear and precise, cutting through the static. The silence on his end was one of pure shock. What do you mean? It's the house. Our house. No, I corrected him, standing up and walking to the window, my back to the room. It is your house. You inherited it. You alone. The mortgage is your responsibility. The taxes are your responsibility. His voice rose, cracking with the familiar whine of panic. Juniper, be serious. I can't afford this on my own. You know that. Mom and Dad, they expected you to help. They said so in the letter. You're supposed to guide me. They guided you into a lifetime of helplessness, I retorted, the anger now a hot lick at the base of my throat. They confused a safety net with a hammock, and you've been sleeping in it for 30 years. Their expectations are not my problem anymore. This isn't fair, he shouted, his voice shrill. They left you that letter because they knew you were strong, because you're the capable one who's good at all this stuff. They trusted you. The manipulative compliment, the same one that had gutted me in the lawyer's office, now sounded pathetic, desperate. It had lost its power. Stronger doesn't mean limitless, Caleb, I said, my voice dropping to a low, intense calm. I was speaking to him, but the words were for me, a mantra I was forging in that very moment. And capable doesn't mean endlessly exploited. I will not pay for your house. I will not manage your finances. I will not be the steward of a legacy that was designed to be my cage. This conversation is over. Do not call me for money again. I ended the call before he could sputter another word. I stood there, my hands still resting on the phone, my knuckles white. My entire body was trembling, not with fear, but with the violent, exhilarating aftershock of a tectonic shift. The silence that filled my apartment was no longer vast and empty. It was sovereign. It was mine. I walked to my liquor cabinet, past the sensible gins and vodkas for guests, and retrieved a bottle of single malt scotch I had bought myself after closing a major deal. A celebratory gift I had never felt I quite deserved to open. I poured 2 fingers into a heavy crystal tumbler, the amber liquid catching the light. Then I walked onto my balcony, heedless of the wind and rain, and took a sip. The scotch burned all the way down, a clean, sharp fire. It tasted like freedom. The fire from that phone call did not extinguish itself. It banked into a steady, high-performance burn that I channeled into the one area of my life that had always been truly mine, my work. The next morning, I walked into Aegis Marketing Solutions feeling taller, my vision sharper. The ambient hum of the office, usually a background noise, sounded like a symphony of purpose. My team, working on a nascent campaign for a new sustainable energy client, looked up as I entered the conference room. I could feel their surprise at the new energy I projected. "Good morning," I said, my voice resonating with a new authority. "Scrap everything we had on the board yesterday. It's too safe, it's derivative." I grabbed a marker and began sketching a new framework on the whiteboard, my movements fluid and decisive. The campaign, which we had tentatively called Green Horizons, was now christened Project North Star. It was no longer just about selling solar panels, it was about selling a paradigm shift. It was about individual empowerment against a backdrop of systemic inertia. The parallels to my own quiet revolution were not lost on me. My team, initially taken aback, quickly caught the spark. David Chen, my brilliant and perceptive graphic designer, watched me for a long moment, his pen still. "This is bold, Juniper," he said, a slow smile spreading across his face. "I love it." Later, as we broke for lunch, he fell into step beside me. "Okay, spill," he said quietly. "You went supernova. This isn't just a new campaign strategy. This is a new you." I gave him a small, genuine smile. Let's just say I've been doing some aggressive decluttering. But the anger, as clarifying as it was, had a way of ambushing me in quiet moments. It dredged up memories with a vicious archaeological precision. One evening, while trying to read a novel, the scent of roasting chicken from a neighbor's apartment transported me back to a Thanksgiving at Viridian Gables 5 years prior. The memory played out in my mind with excruciating detail. I was in the kitchen, single-handedly orchestrating the meal because my mother insisted she was simply too flustered by the pressure of a holiday. I was pulling the 20-pound turkey from the oven when Caleb drifted in, smelling faintly of weed, and announced he had a brilliant idea for a screenplay about a disenfranchised poet. My father, entering behind him, clapped him on the shoulder. "That's the spirit, son. Chase that muse." He then turned to me, sweat beading on my forehead as I wrestled with the roasting pan. "Junes, you're a miracle worker," he'd said. "So reliable. Your mother and I were just saying, we never have to worry about you." He said it like a blessing, but I heard it now as the curse it had always been. They never had to worry about me because I had been conditioned to absorb all the worry myself. I'd spent that entire holiday catering to everyone's needs, and my reward was to be praised for my utility, while Caleb was praised for his abstract, unproductive dreams. The memory left a bitter, metallic taste in my mouth. Haunted by these ghosts, I knew I needed a new outlet, a space where my competence and control were irrelevant. I found it in a small, dusty pottery studio in a converted warehouse downtown. On my first night, the instructor, a woman named Maria with clay caked under her fingernails and serene eyes, told us the first and most important step was centering the clay on the wheel. It sounded simple enough. It was not. The lump of cold, wet clay resisted me. I tried to force it into submission, my knuckles white, my shoulders tensed. The wheel spun, and the clay wobbled pathetically before collapsing into a sad, lopsided heap. I tried again, and it spun out of control, spattering my face and shirt with gray sludge. Frustration, a hot and familiar feeling, rose in my throat. I was Juniper Thorne. I managed million-dollar accounts. I could command a boardroom. I could not, apparently, make a simple clay pot. Maria came over, watching my struggle with a gentle smile. "You're fighting it," she said, her voice calm. "You're trying to muscle it into place. Clay doesn't respond to force. It responds to pressure, steady and calm. You have to feel where it wants to go. Center yourself first. Breathe." She placed her hands over mine, guiding them. Her touch was firm but yielding. Under her guidance, I felt the clay begin to shift, to find its equilibrium on the spinning wheel. It was a revelation. I didn't create anything beautiful that night, or for many nights after. My early attempts were a series of wonky, thick-walled bowls and crooked mugs. But with each session, I learned to let go. I learned to breathe. I learned the difference between brute force and focused intention. I wasn't just shaping clay. I was reshaping my entire approach to existence. In the quiet, rhythmic spin of the wheel, I began to find my own center, a place of strength that had nothing to do with being dependable or shouldering the burdens of others. It was a strength that was quiet, imperfect, and entirely my own. One evening, I managed to create a small, simple bowl that didn't collapse. It was asymmetrical, the rim was uneven, but it was whole. I held it in my hands and felt a surge of pride so pure and profound it almost brought me to tears. It was the first thing I had ever made just for me. While I was slowly finding my center, Caleb was rapidly losing his. My silence was a void he didn't know how to fill, and his panic began to spill into my life in the only way it could, my voicemail. At first, the messages were pleading, tinged with a wounded disbelief. "Junes, it's me. Again. I don't understand why you're being like this. I went to the bank. They used words like delinquency and default. It's just paperwork, right? You're good at this stuff. Please, just call me back." We can fix this together." When I didn't respond, the tone curdled into accusation. "Fine, don't call me back. I see how it is. You're probably happy about this, sitting up there in your fancy apartment. Mom and Dad left me this house to take care of, and you're letting me fail, letting them down. Some sister. I hope you're proud of yourself." The final messages, left weeks later in the dead of night, were fragmented and desperate, the words slurring slightly. "The roof, Junes, it's raining in the damn dining room, right over the table. And there's a notice on the door. It's yellow. I don't know what it means. It's all just falling apart. I don't know what to do." Each message was a small, calculated dart aimed at the heart of the old juniper. I listened to each one, my expression unreadable, and then I would press delete. It was a strange, cold ritual, a necessary confirmation that his chaos was no longer my own. The pressure wasn't just coming from Caleb. It came from the extended universe of my family, with our cousin Sarah acting as its primary ambassador. I ran into her in the produce section of a grocery store, a place so mundane it felt like an ambush. "Juniper," she chirped, her shopping cart rattling as she cornered me by the organic avocados. "I was just thinking about you. We were all so worried." Her face was a carefully constructed mask of concern. "I'm fine, Sarah. Good to see you," I said, my tone polite but cool, hoping to keep the conversation brief. "Well, you say that," she pushed on, lowering her voice conspiratorially. "But your Aunt Carol said Caleb's been having a terrible time, a really terrible time, with the house and, well, everything. He told her you'd refuse to help him. We all thought, surely that can't be right. You've always been so good to him." She paused, waiting for my denial, for my explanation. I simply placed a ripe avocado in my basket. "Caleb received the entirety of our parents' estate," I stated, my voice even. "Managing it is his responsibility now." Sarah's eyes widened. "But Juniper, honey, it's Viridian Gables. Your mother would be heartbroken to see it fall into disrepair. And Caleb, you know him. He's not you. He needs a sensible hand to guide him." The familiar refrain. The same narrative. I turned to face her fully, my gaze direct. "He is a 30-year-old man, Sarah. He is long past the point of needing a guiding hand. He is learning a valuable lesson about consequences." The shock on her face was comical. She looked at me as if I'd grown a second head. It was clear that in the family-approved version of this story, I was the cold-hearted villain. I had broken the unspoken contract, and the clan was displeased. "Well," she stammered, "I just hope you know what you're doing." "I do," I said, offering a small final smile. "For the first time in a very long time, I really do." I pushed my cart past hers, leaving her standing, speechless, by the avocados. The most profound confrontation, however, was silent. It happened one crisp autumn evening, weeks later. I was walking home from my pottery class, my hands still smelling of earth and clay, the small, imperfect bowl I'd made wrapped carefully in my bag. I took a detour, a street I usually avoided, drawn by a morbid curiosity I couldn't explain. And there it was, at the end of the lane, under the dying light of a bruised purple sky. Viridian Gables. It looked haunted. The once immaculate lawn was overgrown with weeds, a few limp brown leaves plastered to the front door. There was a faint trace of peeling paint near one of the dormer windows. It was sagging under the weight of neglect. As I watched from the shadows across the street, the front door opened, and Caleb emerged. The sight of him sent a jolt through me. He looked smaller, diminished. The threadbare sweater, the unruly hair, the slump of his shoulders, it all spoke of defeat. He looked up at the house, his face a mask of pure misery, and for a fleeting second, my heart ached with the ghost of an old instinct. The reflex to run across the street, to put an arm around him and say, "Don't worry, I'll fix it," was a phantom limb, twitching with a memory of its former function. But I remained still. I watched him trudge down the driveway, a man crushed by a gift he couldn't carry. And in that moment, the ache was replaced by a profound, sorrowful clarity. I wasn't mourning him. I was mourning the boy he might have become if he hadn't been so thoroughly protected from reality. I was grieving a potential that had been suffocated by our parents' misguided love. My refusal to help him hadn't been an act of cruelty. It had been the only act of genuine love I had ever been permitted to show him. The love that lets go, the love that trusts that a person can only find their own strength when they are forced to stand on their own 2 feet. He was facing the consequences, and I was finally facing my freedom. I turned and walked away, the bowl in my bag feeling solid and real against my hip. I didn't look back. Walking away from Viridian Gables that evening was a definitive turning point. It was the moment I stopped looking back at the ruins of my past and started focusing on the landscape stretching before me. The ghosts of Caleb and my parents, while not entirely vanquished, no longer walked beside me. They were distant figures in my rearview mirror, shrinking with every step I took forward. My life began to take on new colors, new textures. The space that had been occupied by familial anxiety was now free to be filled with connection, creativity, and a quiet, burgeoning joy. My friendship with Chloe, my college roommate, deepened into a vital anchor. We fell into an easy ritual of Saturday brunches at a sun-drenched cafe where we would talk for hours. It was there, over avocado toast and endless cups of coffee, that I finally told her about seeing Caleb. I described the overgrown lawn, the look of misery on his face, and the strange, sorrowful peace I have felt. Chloe listened intently, her fork paused midair, her gaze full of a fierce, intelligent empathy. So the prodigal son is discovering that the fatted calf doesn't just magically appear, she said wryly, before her expression softened. Junes, you have to know, you didn't do this to him. You just stopped doing it for him. You didn't break your family's legacy. You just exposed the fact that it was already broken. You were the only thing holding the facade together, and it was crushing you. She reached across the table and squeezed my hand. You didn't set a fire. You just walked out of a burning building. Her words were a balm, a powerful validation that quieted the last lingering whispers of guilt. A new, unexpected connection was taking root. I had continued my solo hikes in the Redwood Creek Preserve, but they were no longer always solo. I'd met Liam on a trail a few months back. He was an arborist, a quiet, observant man with kind eyes and a slow smile, who seemed more at home among the towering redwoods than anywhere else. Our initial conversations were about the flora and fauna around us, but they gradually deepened. He never pressed me about my past, never asked about my family. He was interested in the person walking beside him, right now. One crisp Saturday, we hiked a challenging trail to a ridge overlooking the Pacific. The air was sharp with the scent of pine and salt. For the last stretch of the climb, we walked in a comfortable silence, the only sound our breathing and the crunch of our boots on the trail. At the summit, the view was breathtaking, a vast expanse of blue ocean meeting an even vaster sky. We stood there for a long time, watching the waves crash far below. "It's funny," Liam said, his voice a low rumble. "From up here, everything down there seems so manageable." "A matter of perspective," I agreed, feeling the truth of it in my bones. He nodded, turning to look at me. "You seem different from when we first met," he observed. "Lighter, like a tree that's finally gotten enough sunlight." He reached out, not with a grand romantic gesture, but with a simple, quiet confidence, and took my hand. His fingers laced through mine, his touch warm and steady. It was a gesture of pure connection, a bond formed not from need or history or obligation, but from mutual appreciation in the present moment. I leaned my head on his shoulder, and we watched the ocean together, my hand securely in his. For the first time, a relationship felt not like a responsibility, but like a shelter. This new internal foundation had a tangible effect on my career. The confidence and clarity I was cultivating personally made me a more effective and visionary leader at Aegis. Project North Star was a resounding success, exceeding all its targets and earning industry accolades. One afternoon, Eleanor Vance called me into her office. Juniper, she began, foregoing her usual preamble, the board is thrilled with the North Star Initiative. It wasn't just a successful campaign, it was a statement. You've redefined what our clients can expect from us. She paused, her gaze direct. We're creating a new division of strategic initiatives, focused on exactly this kind of forward-thinking, long-term brand building. The board has approved my recommendation. We want you to head it. It's a vice president position. The words hung in the air. Vice president. A year ago, I would have felt a surge of panic, my mind immediately calculating how this new responsibility would impact my real job of caring for Caleb. Now I felt only a deep, resonant hum of pride. It was an achievement I had earned, a reflection of the person I had fought to become. Thank you, Eleanor, I said, my voice steady. I accept. The final brick of my old life crumbled on a Monday morning. I was at my desk, sipping my coffee and reviewing quarterly projections, when an email with an unfamiliar letterhead landed in my inbox. The subject line was stark: Foreclosure Auction Notice, 1703 Maplewood Lane. My heart gave a single hard thump. With a steady hand, I opened it. It was from a law firm, formally notifying interested parties that due to a sustained default on the mortgage, the property commonly known as Viridian Gables would be sold at public auction on the steps of the county courthouse. I read the clinical, impersonal words twice. It was over. The house, the symbol of my family's toxic, manipulative love, the beautifully wrapped trap, had finally sprung on its intended occupant and been dismantled by the cold, impartial mechanics of finance. There was no triumph, no surge of vindictive glee. There was only a profound and absolute peace. The phantom limb, the one that had twitched with a sense of obligation for so long, was finally gone. The weight I didn't even know I was still carrying had vanished. The system had broken, as it was always destined to, and I had done nothing but step out of its way. The day of the auction arrived, a Tuesday in late November. I felt a strange absence of feeling about it, a neutral calm. The old Juniper would have been sick with anxiety, pacing her apartment, imagining the scene on the courthouse steps. The new Juniper made a conscious decision to ignore it entirely. I went to my pottery studio that evening after work. The world outside could deal with the dismantling of the Thornfinch legacy. I had my own creations to attend to. I spent 3 hours at the wheel, my mind blessedly empty of everything but the feel of cool, damp clay spinning beneath my hands. I was working on a set of large planters, and for the first time, I felt a sense of mastery, my hands knowing just what to do. I was not just building pots, I was building a garden for my new life. I found out the results 2 days later. Chloe texted me a link to a local business journal article with the simple message, FYI. A commercial developer had purchased the lot for a significant sum. Their plan was to raze the house and subdivide the 2-acre property to build Maplewood Commons, a cluster of luxury townhouses. The article didn't even mention my family's name. Viridian Gables was now just a property, an asset, its history and emotional weight irrelevant to the market. I felt a quiet click inside me, the sound of a final lock falling into place. Caleb's chapter closed not with a bang, but with a sad, pathetic whimper. Aunt Carol called me, her voice tight with familial duty and exasperation. I thought you should know, she said. Caleb's gone. He was evicted from that apartment he was renting. He tried to borrow money from just about everyone, and when that failed, he just packed whatever was left in his car and drove off. No one knows where he went. I listened, my heart feeling a distant, clinical pity. He had become a ghost, a cautionary tale whispered among relatives. There was no more I could do for him than I could for a stranger on the street. Our bond, once the central pillar of my life, had been fully and completely dissolved. Several months later, on a whim one spring afternoon, I found myself driving through my old neighborhood. The trees were budding, the air sweet with the smell of fresh-cut grass. As I turned onto Maplewood Lane, I slowed the car. Where Viridian Gables had once stood, there was now a scene of managed destruction. A tall chain-link fence surrounded the property, and behind it, a yellow excavator sat beside a mountain of rubble. Half of the house was already gone, revealing a cross-section of its life like a grotesque dollhouse. I could see the floral wallpaper of my childhood bedroom, open to the sky. I pulled the car over, got out, and walked to the fence, my hands gripping the cool metal mesh. A demolition crew was at work, the rhythmic crash and groan of the machinery a brutal kind of music. I watched as the excavator's massive claw bit into the wall of the dining room, the place where my family had shared thousands of meals, and pulled it down in a cloud of plaster dust and splintered wood. I stood there for a long time, watching the systematic erasure of my past. I felt no grief for the house. It had been a beautiful cage, and seeing it dismantled was not a tragedy, but a liberation. I thought of my parents and their final, flawed act of love. They had tried to protect Caleb by shackling me to him, believing my strength was an infinite resource for them to command. They had never understood that true strength isn't about carrying burdens. It's about having the wisdom to know which ones to set down. Their greatest fear was that Caleb would fail, but by trying to prevent his failure, they had prevented his growth. And in trying to secure my role as his keeper, they had inadvertently handed me the tools to my own freedom. The disinheritance letter was not a cage door being locked, it was a key, showing me a door I never knew existed. That summer, I took a solo trip to Zion National Park, a pilgrimage I had promised myself. One dawn, I hiked to a viewpoint overlooking the vast, silent canyons. As the sun rose, it set the ancient stone on fire, painting the landscape in impossible shades of orange, pink, and gold. I felt infinitesimally small, and at the same time, boundless. The drama of my family, the weight of the house, the years of quiet sacrifice, it all seemed like a story about someone else, a lifetime ago. The scale of the world was so much larger than the tiny, suffocating box I had been living in. I breathed in the clean, cool air, and it felt like the first real breath I had ever taken. Tonight, my apartment is quiet and warm. The planters I made, no longer empty, line my balcony, filled with resilient succulents and vibrant herbs. The asymmetrical bowl I was so proud of sits on my coffee table, holding a collection of smooth stones I brought back from Zion. Liam is coming over for dinner. I'm making pasta from scratch, a messy, joyful process. My life is not a grand inherited estate. It is a small, carefully tended garden I have built with my own two hands, from the ground up. It is imperfect, and it is real, and it is entirely mine. My parents' unintended legacy was the painful, priceless gift of self-reclamation. They had wanted me to be their eternal safety net, but by trying to force me into that role, they had instead forced me to grow wings. I was Juniper Thorne, no longer defined by the expectations of others, but by the quiet, steady strength of my own centered life. My moral reckoning was complete. Like and subscribe for more stories of quiet revolution.